I am here today with Shelby Eloria from All Set Style, and I've had the privilege of hiring Shelby as a stylist, and I look forward to telling you a little bit more about that, but also hearing what Shelby has to say about the importance of style and some of the things that have been important to her and on her entrepreneurial journey. So thanks for being here, Shelby.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you and I met, and I think this is such an important piece of information for entrepreneurs. I went to a networking event. I only went to that particular event one time. I don't know how many times you had been to that event, but you were there. And there was something about how you showed up in just our brief interaction that always stuck with me. Yeah. And it wasn't until years later where I think I want to hire a stylist, and right away I thought about you. And I think that just speaks to the importance of showing up. You never know who you're meeting and where that's going to lead. And sometimes we don't see that right away. So that's where I first remember meeting you. I don't even know if you remember that, but
I remember meeting you there. It's really cool to hear that I made an impression, because you never know, right? Sometimes you never know these things, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And so a couple of years ago, I was doing a branding photo shoot, and we had the conversation about what to wear and what does that look like, and the conversation about hiring a stylist. And I remember having the thought, I can dress myself. Like, this seems like such a silly thing to hire somebody to help me go shopping and pick outfits. Like, I've been doing it for over 40 years. Yeah. And I just thought, no, this is something I want to lean into. And what an eye-opening experience. So is that a common thought? Or
Yes, absolutely, because we think we can dress ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We dress how we learned and what we were taught, and oftentimes we don't know what we don't know, right? And I think a lot of people think like you did, well, I'll take that money and I'll spend it instead on clothes and just buy the things. However, when you're not intentional about it and thinking about what is that vision that you have for yourself, who is it you want to become, instead of going through the patterns that you've already gone through. Like, sometimes I think of myself as a habit changer, because we have the habits of buying the same things, going for the same looks. And when you have someone else come in that has, can kind of help you shift that and look at yourself differently, it's a game changer for a lot of people.
I think that's perfect. You're a habit changer. And I think I do the same thing in many different areas. But that's exactly what you did for me. And you gave me a piece of homework. You said, go into your closet and pick out all of the outfits that you love. And it was so fascinating, because I walked into my closet and I went, I don't love any of this. I have a huge closet. I had lots of clothes. And it was such an eye-opener to realize that that's exactly what my habit was to buy something, buy because it was comfortable or what that looked like. But under the question of what do you love in your closet, it was really quite startling, actually.
Yeah, that's I love that story, and it affirms to me about asking that question. And it's how often I almost didn't start my business because I had the belief that, well, what we wear is vanity. We shouldn't care about what we wear. And as I sat with it and thought about it, I was like, yeah, but where do we learn what to wear or how to dress for ourselves? It's such an important communication tool. And figuring out what do we actually feel good in, it is powerful.
So what are the common habits or beliefs when people are shopping for themselves, or when you're talking to people?
Well, common habits are buying the same thing over and over again, getting into your comfort zone. And it could be that you're trying to hide. It could be that, well, I've always bought this, I don't know anything else. A lot of people think that they just don't have style. They'll look at someone who they think has style and they'll be like, well, they have style, I don't. And the thing is we all have style. It's whether we intentionally create it or not. A big thing too is to think about what other people think about you. That is a habit that so many of us get stuck in our head. We put something on and we think about, well, what would my mom say, or what would my friends say, or what would my colleagues say? And it's more about them versus about what you love and what you actually feel good in. I had this one client that I once worked with, and she really struggled to envision her style personality. What is that vision? So I worked it from a different angle for her, and everything she put on in her closet was similar. She didn't love. It didn't look like her. It didn't light her up. We went shopping. We found her some pieces that worked great for her. And she texted me a few days later and she's like, Shelby, I have all new clothes, but I've never felt more like myself. And I thought that was such a beautiful way of saying it, is it really is about that discovery of yourself. And when we tell ourselves stories that, well, I can't wear this, or I shouldn't wear this, or I shouldn't want this, even if you want it, we get in the habit of not letting ourselves even go there.
I love that, finding yourself. And I think that's what you've mentioned is, yes, you're doing the exterior, right, and that image and that style, but talk about how that impacts that inner self-image.
Yeah, it really starts internally. And that's what I do, is I figure out who you are. I ask questions to draw out who are you in the inside. And if you are wearing clothes that don't actually reflect who you are, there's going to be this disengagement with who you are, and people will see you and they'll be like, okay, there's something going on here. There's not something that's not quite right. Even if you look great in what you wear, if it doesn't reflect who you are, you don't feel like yourself, and you don't feel like you're really showing up. And people notice that.
So the person who maybe is more public facing, right? I do a lot of public facing stuff. So someone might say, well, Stacey, that makes sense for you to get a stylist because you're out there. But what about the person who's maybe got an office job, or they are the stay-at-home mom or parent, or maybe just not quite as public? What would you say to that person?
That is such a good question. Style is not just for getting dressed up and going out. Style is for every single part of your life, including when you're lounging around at home by yourself. The most important person that we communicate with what we wear is to ourselves. And when we're lazing on the couch, I often will say this, not every sweatshirt is made the same. You can feel very sloppy and lazy and frumpy in a sweatshirt, or you can feel really good in choosing the color and the style that all work for you. And you're going to rest better when you feel like yourself. I worked with a stay-at-home mom once, and everything she loved in her wardrobe was for going out. However, how often does she wear that? Like maybe 10% of the time? And everything that she wore on a day-to-day basis, she was just like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just with the kids, or, you know, I shouldn't care about that. I need to throw it in the laundry because it always gets stained. So what we did is we made a plan for building that wardrobe that she could throw in the laundry and wash, and it still comes out, it still feels good. She can get down on the floor and play with the kids, and she feels like herself.
Yeah.
And she feels really good.
There's some key components to it. So talk about what are those key components you're looking at?
Yeah, so I call it the style foundations, because this is really, it's like when you create the foundation of a house, it's creating that foundation of your wardrobe and your style. So there's color. There's certain colors that will enhance our skin and some that detract from it. And if you've ever been told, are you feeling okay today? It's probably because you're wearing a color that's not your best color.
Right.
And I always tell people this is a tool, it's not a rule. It helps you, though, be able to assess that, what do you feel like a 10 out of 10 in? And that's what you want. And that's the using the tool to get there is really key and important. So there's the color.
I want to tell you a story about this. This was one of the biggest things, because from a color aesthetic, I love the fall. I love those warm colors. And so I was attracted to those in clothes. I learned those are not my colors. And so what an eye opener, again, a habit. I had no idea, but what a difference that made. I can still love fall, and I can still love the fall colors. Doesn't mean I have to wear them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, is sometimes visually we see something and we really like it. However, it's not the best for us. So you can appreciate it on someone else and you can still love it, and just know that it might not be the best.
Yeah. So color.
So color. Then there's silhouette. So this is your body shape. And I like saying silhouette because it feels more beautiful. And I think all bodies are beautiful. And a really big thing is we're often made to feel like, well, I can't fit those clothes, or there's something wrong with me because I don't fit that style. However, when you reverse that and you think about, I know my body and I know my style, I know what cuts of clothing help me to feel balanced, and it's not my fault, it's the clothing fault.
That was huge when I shopped with you, because I do not enjoy shopping for pants. That is not my favorite thing to do. But I would try on a pair of jeans and you would say, no, those pockets are not in the right place for your body. And it was no longer my body is wrong. It was the pants are wrong. And that was such so minor, but significant.
Yeah, there's so much psychology in what we wear, why we wear it, the emotion that we feel out of it. Yeah. And it breaks my heart. Like, I've had people in tears that I've worked with because they've thought that they viewed themselves one way for so long, and they've been so hard on themselves. And yet it's a little bit of a reversal, and it's empowering, right? To know, like, okay, it's not me. I understand myself better, and now I know what clothes to look for that help me to feel balanced.
Color?
Silhouette. Style personality.
Okay.
I love style personality because it's such a creative part of who we are. And oftentimes we see ourselves as how other people see us, what other people have said to us. Oh, you look great in this, or you look great in that, but you don't feel good in it. So style personality is really starting to piece together, what is it that you love to wear? And I had one client once, she loved the minimalist side of things. And yet in the form that she filled out, she had put, oh yeah, I'm minimalist, that's it. And then when we were talking, she's like, I really love RuPaul in drag. And I was like, okay, let's talk about what this could actually look like. And she's like, I just love the flair. She's like, I don't want to dress in drag, but I love the flair. It's just so beautiful. And she's like, maybe I can just do it in my makeup. And I'm like, well, why not in your clothes? Mm. And so as I went through the process with her, she liked the very simple minimalist style, but every time there was a flare in it, she just lit up. And I love being able to find that in someone. It's not about dressing people like me and how I dress. It's about doing that for them.
So style personality. Is there one more?
Yeah, there's one more. So the fourth one is lifestyle.
Okay.
And this is that style is not just for getting dressed up.
Yeah.
It's for every part of your life. It's for even your casual wear, for going on vacation too. Like, you can use all of these concepts for going on vacation, for staying at home, for relaxing at home, for getting dressed up and going to a gala or a ball. Look at what you actually spend your time doing, and make sure you have a wardrobe that reflects that. Because if you spend most of your time at home, well, make sure your style and your clothing reflects that.
Well, that was one of our conversations, is I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls, right? The waist up. And so having a little bit more design or color up top, right? And intentionally choosing those things is important.
Yeah, so understanding what you need it for is, it's so key.
What about budget in all of this?
Great question.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people think style and they're like $.
Yeah.
The thing is if you look in your closet, I actually just worked with someone yesterday who was like, oh my goodness, all this money that's going to waste. We spend a lot of money on what we have that we never wear and we never feel good in.
Yeah.
So first of all, let those go if they don't serve you, because there's no point in keeping it around if you don't love it.
I had a lot of clothes leave this house.
Yeah.
A lot.
I think we had like 7
Oh my
bags
gosh,
full.
I'm embarrassed to say it, but
you're
it's
not
true.
Alone. You're not alone in that. It's that habit. We keep buying things. We don't move things along. And it's amazing. I'm not sure how you felt, but when you get it out, it's almost like this weight that's been lifted off of you. And that's incredible to have that freedom and almost that lightness that can come with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it is hard to say that. So think about all the money you spent on those, and by investing in understanding yourself a little bit more and understanding your style, you're going to make better purchasing decisions, so that you don't have those pieces that have the tags on, or you put on and you take off every time. Mm-hmm. So just from that perspective, investing your time and money into understanding yourself is very important from a style perspective. The other thing is, you don't have to shop at high-end stores. There's often a myth of, well, it's celebrities that hire stylists.
Yes.
I work with everybody. And I've even worked with people who just do my Style Foundations program. They take that information and they go thrifting. Yeah. Because now they understand what to look for. So even in a thrifting perspective, it can narrow down, okay, these are the colors I'm going to look for. These are the styles I'm going to look for.
Well, and when you look good, you feel good. And when you feel good, you just show up differently, right? And so it's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw this a reel or something recently, and this guy invested something like $10,000 in his wardrobe. And he just as an experiment. And he said he got like 6-fold back from that, just because he changed it and because he felt better.
Yeah.
So it can affect your income and how you show up places, and not necessarily that's why you do it, but it can be an outcome of it for sure.
Yeah. People who look better, feel better, they show up better, they make more, right? It just makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So so I'm curious now how you even got into this industry. So, and I know you were headed down a completely different career path and you had a pivotal moment. So I would love for you to share that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've loved style since I was a kid. My mom tells me I was a year and a half old and I would be like, no, I'm dressing myself. I know what I like. And growing up, I loved dressing Barbies. I loved dressing my younger siblings, sometimes to their chagrin, but I loved clothing. I wasn't a trend person. It was more just how clothing makes us feel. However, it never even occurred to me that I would ever be in this industry, because I had the thought of, well, clothing is vanity. We shouldn't care about it. So I ended up going to school. I wanted to be an accountant at first. And then in my third year of university, I was on a chairlift with a gentleman and I didn't know who he was, but we chatted the whole way up. And at the top, he's like, you're not an accountant. So I went and I changed my major. And
so say that one more time and pause there, because this is important to say again.
Okay.
So you're on a chairlift.
I'm on a chairlift. So I'm with this gentleman I don't know. We're going up the chairlift. We're chatting the whole way. And at the top, he looks at me and he's like, you're not an accountant. And I was like, I'm not? I thought I wanted to be an accountant since I was in grade 9. And it impacted me so much that I must have already been somewhere in my brain questioning it, because I went back to school that next week and I went and changed my major.
Wow.
Yeah, and I don't usually make decisions quite that quickly. So it was very impactful.
Yeah. Talk about the power of decision and how a moment, you really can change the trajectory of your life in a moment.
Yeah. So I didn't really, there weren't a lot of majors at that time. Now I think there's so many more. So I was doing my Bachelor of Commerce degree. And the one that stood out for me was human resources. I knew nothing about it. However, it dealt with people. I like people. Perfect. Let's go with that. When I actually first started my job, my brother, he was in engineering school, and he said to me, he's like, Shelby, you should start a personal shopping business. All these engineers are getting these really good jobs, but they don't know how to dress. And at that point, I was so risk adverse. I was like, no, I can't do that. Like, I need to get a job. Like, how would I even start that? How would I was in so much self-doubt. And it's interesting because I look back in that, my mom was a registered RN nurse, very conservative, like risk adverse. Then my dad was an entrepreneur, totally risk taker. And I always identified more with my mom. I always thought, well, that's more who I am.
Right.
And so in that moment, I was like, I didn't even touch that. I was just like, I'm not even gonna go there. Okay. And so I continued in my HR career. And I had people who would be like, hey, Shelby, if I buy you lunch, will you go shopping with me? Which is so odd, or felt odd to me, because I was like, sure, why not? And it was interesting because it would get noticed. And people would be like, oh, you went shopping with so-and-so, like, she looks really good and she's showing up differently. And I saw the power of that, and I felt it myself too. I had this one day, I call it my green dress story, and I woke up one Monday morning and I was not feeling the day. You know those days where you're just like, I need to go back to bed and stay under the covers. And so I reached into the back of my closet and I pulled out stuff that matched my mood, and I didn't feel good. And about half an hour after getting into work, I get a knock at my door, and it was my boss from Toronto. I'd met him in person maybe once before, and I wanted to crawl under the desk. I just wasn't feeling good. It was appropriate because I was still within the dress code. Yeah. However, it didn't feel good, and it didn't feel like me. And he probably never noticed, but I didn't feel like myself all day, and I didn't show up well, and that affects me. It affects my boss. It affects the company. And I told myself I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to let myself do that. So I made the decision then, what would I wear next time I felt like this? And I thought about, well, what do I love to wear? And I have this one emerald green dress that I felt so good. Every time I put it on, the fit of it, the style, the color, everything. And I made that decision that if I ever feel that way, that's what I'm wearing. Don't even have to think about it. So you talk about the power of decision.
Yeah.
And that has helped me so much, because now when I wake up, it doesn't happen often, but when I do and I feel that way, I put that dress on and it completely changes my mindset, my mood, how I show up, everything.
I love that. And it's an advanced decision. It's not waiting for your mood to determine it. You've made an advanced decision. This is what I'm going to do in those moments. Very powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're in your HR career, you're starting to get some information, some feedback. And what's next?
So I was starting to feel very discontent. Wanting something more, wanting something different. I had a friend, she wanted it too. So we started meeting once a week to talk about, well, what kind of business could we start? And it never ended up taking off anywhere. And I spent some time thinking about, well, what do I love about what I do? And I loved the coaching of leaders. And it was that psychology side of things. It was helping people to see themselves differently and to see what they do differently. And I would see the impact of that. And so I actually went to become a psychologist. I started taking some undergrad courses towards that. And then with some personal stuff going on, I ended up deciding not to continue with that at the time. However, it still kept me thinking about, okay, what do I want to do? And a few years later, I was working in the oil and gas industry, and there was a lot of layoffs going on. And so being in HR, I was part of several rounds of layoffs. And towards the end of 2016, we were going into I think it was our fourth round of mass layoffs. And the day before, I get the call. And I knew what it was as soon as I got the call. So I gathered all my stuff, I went to the meeting, and I was being laid off. It was such an interesting moment for me, because part of me wanted it. I think I manifested it, because I was always like, if only. I had the golden handcuffs. Why do you want to leave a good paying job that has benefits and bonuses and that security, even though I was miserable? And it was my own fault that I was miserable, but I was feeling that. Just took it slow. I had the time to be able to do that. I took some courses, like I'm a certified image consultant, and I just affirmed. It was a lot of affirmation that I have something, I have a gift here. And I started to think about, in my time in HR, watching people when they would show up to a meeting or they would speak, when they felt like themselves, they showed up better. They were heard more. And I was like, well, but where do you learn that? Unless you have someone in your life or you have a natural innate ability, where do you learn that? And so that's when I decided to start All Set Style, from that perspective of, it's a place to teach people, to help them to learn to be themselves and how to see themselves. And I really see it as part of our own personal development.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that started All Set Style.
And the journey from employee to entrepreneur, what were some of the key things from a mindset and strategy perspective? Maybe things you did well, or maybe things looking back you go, ooh, wish I would have done that differently.
That was really difficult, because it's all on me now, right? And so going from being responsible to somebody else, and I still had that mindset when I would do things, it would be like, oh, this is for someone else, instead of feeling like I'm in charge here. And it actually took me a few years to shift that mindset of like, okay, I'm responsible here, I'm in charge, and I can show up how I need to as the boss. But yeah, I think even my work style was like, okay, I had to figure out how to set deadlines for myself, because I'm a procrastinator and I can procrastinate all day long and keep going. And so I had to be able to start doing that for myself. Is like, okay, when does this need to be done? I brought in other people who were also business owners to kind of help me with that, or we could help each other and create that accountability together. And that was really, really important too. Another thing was people paying me to do what I love. That was really hard. And it was really hard for me to even set my pricing and to be able to, I'd go through the service and then I would start thinking like, oh, they hated it. it was horrible. They thought that was such a waste of money. And then I'd have a hard time going and sending an invoice after we worked together. And then I'd have all this self-doubt of like, what am I doing?
Yeah. And how did you override that?
Well, one thing I did was I made the decision to start invoicing before.
Yeah.
And that was a really big game changer for me, because then it was like, okay, it's done. I don't even have to think about that.
Yeah.
It's off the table, and then I can just fully show up for them.
Right.
I also started to really pay attention to how is this, like watching how it affects people. And even though I don't hear from someone necessarily right away, some people I would follow up with and I would find out.
Yeah.
But what started happening over time was I would run into people I'd worked with, and I would hear from them the impact that us working together had. And that started to kind of build that cookie jar, you could say,
Yeah.
of like, okay, this is making a difference.
Yes.
It's long-term making a difference. People who I worked with a few years ago, it's making a difference for them. And so it was just accepting that. And instead of focusing on my own self-doubts, it was like, well, here's the evidence.
Yes. Love that. Really important. I know that you've invested in your own personal development coaches mindset. What are some of those mindset strategies that have been just game changers for you, or important lessons that you've learned along the way?
Well, one big thing is to invest in myself.
Yeah.
That it's okay. This was actually going back to the corporate, or the mindset of going from an employee to a business owner, is that it is important to invest in yourself. And it's important to, part of your workday can be your own personal development and growing yourself so that you can grow your business. And that was a really big shift for me. One of the most impactful books that I read was Mindset by Carol Dweck. And understanding that growth mindset and being able to notice that. The crazy thing is, so I read this like 7-8 years ago now, and I just noticed this past summer, I went through a lot, and I realized I had a fixed mindset in a lot of areas. And you kind of get to the point where you're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm very open-minded, but it was very eye-opening. So it's something that it continues over time.
So I know that it's not a straight line from where you were to where you want to be, and adversity, challenges, failures, setbacks are part of not just the entrepreneurial journey, but the life journey. So tell us about a time maybe where there was a setback, a failure, or some of those what the heck have I done moments, and what have you learned from those?
So a big one that, there's been several. One that pops into my mind is when the pandemic hit. And suddenly I go from having this like in-person, very, going out to stores and to people's homes, to not being able to do that at all. And that was, it felt like a huge setback. And I did question myself, like, should I even continue with this? And what I decided to do was to use that time to be able to develop a different part of me and a different part of my business. So I actually, one of the first things I did was get together on Zoom with a couple other people and create a personal brand. So that's where I even made the shift to Shelby Eloria as my stage name. And I built this whole personal brand. So I used that time effectively. Yeah. And that was a really big thing, was that mindset shift of like, okay, I could see this as, woe is me, I can't continue with my business, or I can use the time to build something else and feel fortunate that my life is set up in a way that I can do that. Yeah.
I think leaving corporate too, one of the pieces to go back to is when you're in corporate, you have teams, you have managers, you have other people with other levels of expertise. So maybe not direct coaches or mentorships, but you're part of a team. And then when you start your own business, you're all of a sudden on your own. And so that investing in yourself, we think, it's a luxury, but we had it in place. It was built in before. Now we have to go create that for ourselves, and how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, doing some of those investments have been key for me. And even in believing in myself and believing that I'm important enough to make an investment in my own learning or growth or support system or whatever that is at the time.
Yeah. Well, the investment I made in your services was eye-opening. I learned a lot about myself, my habits, what that looked like, right? And it was a good, I call it pattern interrupt.
Yeah.
And just, you're such a pleasure. And just working with you, Shelby, there was never any like shame, blame, like feel bad about myself. It's always been an uplifting, inspiring experience. And I believe everybody should give themselves that gift, because again, that's knowledge and information you'll have forever, right? So it's an investment, but it will return to you basically for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, these are tools that you have that will never go away, because you have the knowledge now.
Yeah.
Right?
So we will definitely put your contact information in the description so people can reach out to you.
Amazing.
Any last message for somebody who's sitting there and wondering about their style, or is this for me, or what's their next step? What would you say to that person?
I think the biggest thing is really, like you did, is thinking about, does what you wear reflect who you are and who you're becoming?
Yeah.
Ask yourself that question. It doesn't have to be that you work with me. However, when you make that decision and you start to investigate, well, who is it that I want to be? You think about your vision, your dreams. Who is that person? And start becoming that person now. And I can definitely help with that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shelby.
Amazing.
So appreciate
Thank you so much.
I hope you'll take these tips, these lessons from Shelby. Look inside of your own closet, really looking at that self-image. Who are you? Who are you becoming? And is your closet reflective of that? Thanks for being here. I'm Stacey Berger. Here is to you living a life that you love.